So, your doctor says those two words, breech baby. And just like that, your mind can start racing with a million questions. And let's be honest, a little bit of anxiety. What does this really mean? What happens now? Well, in this explainer, we're going to take a deep breath together and walk through all the answers, using expert medical advice to turn that feeling of uncertainty into a clear, confident plan.
Hearing that word can definitely be a little jarring, but hang in there. A breech position is actually way more common than you'd think, and the first step is just understanding what's going on. We're going to cover everything from what the diagnosis means to what your delivery plan could look like so you know exactly what to expect. Let's start with the roadmap.
All right, here's our game plan. First, we'll get clear on what breech actually is, and more importantly, why it's usually no big deal early on. Then we'll look into why some babies decide to stay in that position. After that, we'll talk about a special turning procedure called an ECV, go over the safest delivery options, and then we'll wrap things up by separating some common myths from the real facts. Okay, so what in the world does breech even mean? It's actually pretty simple. Instead of being head down and ready to go, your baby is positioned with their bottom or feet first. But honestly, the most important part of this whole thing isn't the what, it's the when. And there's one single statistic that explains everything. 96%. Seriously, if you remember one number from this whole thing, make it this one. That's how many breech babies flip head down all by themselves before it's time for delivery. It just goes to show you that being breech early on is super common, and almost all the time, it's just a temporary phase. I mean, think about it. Your baby is basically doing gymnastics in there. A scan in the 5th or 6th month that says breech, that's just a snapshot in time. They could be head down the very next day. It's really only as you get closer to your due date that their final position becomes a key part of the delivery plan. But what about that small group? The 3 to 4% of babies who don't end up making that final turn. Why do some of them stay in that breech position? Well, sometimes they're just comfy, but doctors do look for a few specific things. What's really interesting is that half the time, there's no clear reason at all. The baby's just happy where they are. For the other cases, it often boils down to room to move. For instance, too much amniotic fluid gives them so much space they can just keep on flipping, while too little can make it tough to turn. Things like uterine fibroids or having twins can also just reduce the amount of real estate they have to do that big somersault. So what if your baby is still breech as you get close to the finish line? Well, there's a medical option called an external cephalic version, or ECV for short. It sounds complicated, I know, but it's a very direct, hands-on way to help the baby turn. An ECV is pretty much exactly what it sounds like. A specially trained doctor uses their hands on the outside of your belly to gently and very carefully guide the baby through a little forward roll, turning them into that head-down position. It's a really precise and controlled maneuver. Now, with an ECV, timing is absolutely everything. It's almost always done right around the 36-week mark. See, if you do it any earlier, the baby has so much room to swim around that they might just flip right back to where they started. The goal is to do the turn when the baby is big enough, but still has just enough room to move and hopefully stay put. Because an ECV involves manually moving the baby, safety is the absolute #1 non-negotiable priority. It is only ever done in a hospital by a trained specialist. There's a whole safety net in place. You might get a steroid injection beforehand just to help the baby's lungs mature, and an entire operating theater is kept on standby. This means that if any little thing seems off, the team can move to an emergency C-section immediately to protect both you and the baby. And this leads to a really, really critical warning. You might hear stories or even get offers from people who aren't doctors, who say they can massage the baby into the right position. You must avoid this. Any attempt by someone who isn't a trained doctor in a proper hospital setting is incredibly dangerous and can lead to really serious, even devastating complications. This is a job for medical experts only, period. So let's say an ECV doesn't work, or maybe it just wasn't the right option for you. The focus then just shifts to the safest way to bring your baby into the world, and that delivery plan often comes down to one big question. Is this your first baby? For a first-time mom with a breech baby, a planned C-section is almost always going to be the recommended path. And the reason is simple. It's all about avoiding the biggest risk of a vaginal breech birth, which is the baby's head, the largest part, getting stuck after the body's already out. Now, for a second or third baby, a vaginal delivery might be on the table, but only if every single condition is absolutely perfect and the medical team is super experienced with it.
Okay, now that we've covered the big medical plans, let's switch gears and explore some of the other questions and just curiosities people have about breech babies. We'll look at some cool data and even share a practical tip you can try right at home.
Okay, this is a pretty fascinating piece of data. A really big study, we're talking 70,000 births, found a slight difference based on gender. It turns out breech babies were just a little bit more likely to be girls than boys. It's not a rule or anything for sure, but it's a fun little statistical quirk. Want to play detective before your next scan? Just pay attention to where the kicks are. If you're feeling a lot of thumps and bumps way down low, almost on your bladder, that could mean your baby's feet are down there, so they're breech. But if you feel those little kicks way up high under your ribs, that's a great sign your baby is probably in the head down position already. And hey, here's a super simple, totally safe tip that might help encourage your baby to turn. Try sleeping on your side with a pillow between your legs. This position can help open up your pelvis a little bit, creating just a tiny bit more space. Now, there's no guarantee, of course, but it's a comfortable way to sleep that might just give your baby the extra wiggle room they need.
So, the most important thing to take away from all of this is that a breech diagnosis is not an emergency. It's not a crisis. It's simply a signal, it's a sign to work closely with your medical team to create a safe, clear, and calm plan for your baby's delivery. Understanding your options is what gives you a sense of control. And hopefully, this has given you the right questions to ask and the confidence you need to navigate the path ahead.